August 7th, 1942, 0520 hours, Tokyo Bay. Barely 1 hour after the first United States Marines stepped ashore on Guadalcanal. The destroyer Arari sliced through pale morning mist southeast of Yokosuka Naval Base, her crew tense at anti-submarine stations. The Pacific, once a Japanese lake, no longer felt safe. On the bridge, Vice Admiral Raizo Tanaka stood silently beside his operations officer, each man holding a tin cup of bitter tea, while the sun pushed weak light through the fog. Tanaka commanded Destroyer Squadron 2, the elite torpedo force of the Imperial Japanese Navy. At least, it once had been. Now, like much of the fleet, it had been scattered across vast distances. Forced to guard territory Japan had seized in a 6-month whirlwind but could no longer fully defend. A radio man appeared in the doorway, his expression pale and rigid. "Admiral," he said carefully, "priority signal from Combined Fleet Headquarters." Tanaka took the flimsy sheet. His eyes scanned the characters once, twice, a third time. Nothing changed. The Americans had launched a major amphibious landing, an invasion, not a raid. 11,000 Marines, supported by carriers, cruisers, battleships, and more transports than Japanese scouts could count, were on Guadalcanal. It was the first time since the Russo-Japanese War that Japan's navy had been caught strategically off balance. December 7th, 1941, had felt like a sunrise over a new empire. Japan's offensive had stormed across Southeast Asia, crushing Western garrisons and humiliating the United States and Britain in a matter of months. But 8 months later, the sun rising over Tokyo Bay illuminated a different reality. The Americans had seized the initiative. When Tanaka finally spoke, his voice was low. "Signal all ships. Prepare for immediate deployment south." He walked to the bridge wing and stared into the grey waters, as if he could see across the vast Pacific to the Solomon Islands. "Guadalcanal," he murmured. The name was unfamiliar, but the implications were not. If the Americans finish that airfield, they can strike Rabaul. They can sever our supply lines. They can break the entire southern perimeter. At Rabaul, headquarters of the newly formed 8th Fleet, Vice Admiral Gunichi Mikawa was reading the same invasion reports aboard his flagship, the heavy cruiser Chokai. His staff scrambled for clarity. Messages from Tulagi and Guadalcanal were chaotic and incomplete. Japanese forces on Tulagi, roughly 900 naval troops, were already being overwhelmed. The airfield under construction at Lunga Point, intended to anchor Japan's defense of the South Pacific, had fallen into American hands before it was even completed. "Where is the carrier strike force?" Mikawa demanded. "Where is Kido Butai?" The answer chilled the operations room. The surviving carriers, Shokaku, Zuikaku, and the newly commissioned Junyo and Hiyo, were far away, refitting and rebuilding after the devastating defeat at Midway only 2 months earlier. Japan's elite air crews, the heart of its carrier strength, were gone. Battleships were scattered. Land-based aircraft were grounded by bad weather. Only Mikawa's cruisers and a handful of destroyers at Kavieng and Rabaul were immediately available. Mikawa made his decision swiftly. He would attack the American transports that night. Japan's navy still possessed the finest night-fighting doctrine in the world, excellent optics, highly trained crews, and the deadly Type 93 Long Lance, the most advanced torpedo on Earth. If he could strike the American anchorage before dawn, he might wipe out their supply ships and leave the Marines stranded. At 1600 hours, 7 cruisers and the destroyer Unagi departed Rabaul at high speed, threading south through the Solomon Islands. Mikawa knew the risks. In daylight, American carrier aircraft would annihilate his force. But at night, he held the advantage. That night, as the column raced through the slot, Mikawa thought of Pearl Harbor, of how the war was supposed to unfold. Japan's brilliant opening moves had stunned the world. Pearl Harbor, the fall of the Philippines, Singapore, and the Dutch East Indies had seemed to guarantee victory. But Pearl Harbor had also left one job unfinished: the destruction of the American carriers. Their escape doomed Japan to a war of attrition it could never win. American industry was an avalanche just beginning to move. At 2300 hours on August 8th, Mikawa's force passed Savo Island's dark silhouette. Ahead lay the glow of the American anchorage. The Americans had destroyers screening the approaches, but expected no night attack. Mikawa's cruisers slipped past undetected. At 0130 hours on August 9th, long-lance torpedoes streaked through black water. Seconds later, the night erupted in flames. The Battle of Savo Island was a slaughter. In just over 30 minutes, Mikawa's force crippled the Allied screening group. 3 American cruisers, Astoria, Quincy, Vincennes, and the Australian cruiser Canberra were sunk or mortally damaged. More than 1,000 Allied sailors were dead. It was the worst defeat in U.S. naval history in a surface engagement. But victory carried a cost. Mikawa faced a terrible decision: press the attack and destroy the American transports, or withdraw before daylight. His cruisers were disorganized, their formations scattered. Dawn was only a few hours away, and American carriers, Enterprise, Saratoga, and Wasp, were believed to be nearby. If caught in daylight, his entire force could be wiped out. He chose caution. The cruisers withdrew north, leaving the American transports untouched. That decision sealed Japan's fate on Guadalcanal. By August 9th evening, American Marines were ashore with the bulk of their supplies, and the captured airfield, soon renamed Henderson Field, was already being repaired. Within days, American aircraft from the Cactus Air Force took to the sky, making daylight operations in the Solomon Sea nearly suicidal for Japanese ships. This was the moment Tanaka later called the turning of the tide. Japan's response was frantic. Headquarters ordered Tanaka to assume command of the reinforcement and supply effort. It would later be known as the Tokyo Express. But the truth was cruel. Japan lacked the logistics to support a prolonged campaign. The Imperial Army insisted on landing troops by slow transports, as they had in earlier victories. Tanaka argued desperately for fast destroyer transports only. Anything slower would be destroyed by American aircraft flying from Henderson Field. His warnings went unheeded. On August 18th, Colonel Ichiki's elite battalion landed east of the airfield and attacked immediately. They ran headlong into Marine positions, reinforced with barbed wire, machine guns, and artillery. By dawn, 800 of Ichiki's 900 men were dead. Those who survived fled into the jungle. The Japanese army refused to believe the reports at first. Ichiki burned his colors and committed suicide. It was a preview of what the next 6 months would look like. Japan kept sending troops. The Americans kept killing them. By late August, Tanaka's destroyers were making desperate high-speed runs at night down the slot. Crews unloaded men and supplies under moonlight, racing to escape before dawn brought American dive bombers. Every night, cost lives. Every mission burned precious fuel Japan could not replace. Tanaka himself lost multiple flagships, first Jinsu damaged, then his transfer to Kagero, then to the cruiser Kinugas. The Americans called these frantic reinforcement missions the Tokyo Express. Japanese sailors called them something far darker, the route to death. By early September, the situation had worsened. Army commanders demanded heavy equipment and artillery, but Tanaka had no safe way to deliver them. Barges were too slow. Transports were floating targets. Destroyers could carry only light cargo. Whenever heavier transports were used, American aircraft found them and burned them alive. On September 12-14th, Kawaguchi's brigade attacked Henderson Field from the jungle. The result was another massacre. Marines held, supported by air power and artillery. Japanese officers blamed each other, blamed the Navy, blamed fate. Tanaka wrote in his journal, "We send them with courage, but without firepower. Courage alone dies in front of machine guns." American dominance grew daily. Their logistics pipeline functioned flawlessly. Japan's barely functioned at all. Then came the Battle of Cape Esperance on October 11th to 12th. Japanese cruisers under Rear Admiral Aritomo Goto attempted to bombard Henderson Field. American Admiral Norman Scott, using radar, technology Japan still underestimated, intercepted them in the dark. The Japanese force was ambushed. Cruiser Furutaka sank. Aoba was heavily damaged. Goto was mortally wounded. A second Japanese admiral lost in a month. Shock rippled through Japanese command circles. Radar had erased Japan's night fighting advantage, their one remaining edge. On October 13th to 14, battleships Kongo and Haruna shelled Henderson Field in a brutal night bombardment, firing over 900 shells. At dawn, the field looked destroyed. But Marine engineers had the runway patched within hours. By afternoon, American aircraft were flying again. Then came the final disaster. On October 13th to 15th, Tanaka led a convoy carrying 11,000 Japanese troops. 4 slow transports reached Guadalcanal, beached themselves, and began unloading. But American aircraft returned at dawn. All 4 transports were destroyed. Most of the supplies burned. The troops who made it ashore soon joined the starving, exhausted remnants of previous units. Tanaka returned to Shortland Harbor on October 16th. His official report was factual, reserved. His private journal was not. Pearl Harbor gave us 6 months. We wasted them. Midway destroyed our offensive strength. Now Guadalcanal consumes everything we send. Pearl Harbor's success blinded us. It made us believe the Americans lacked resolve. We were wrong. We awakened them. By late October 1942, the Imperial Navy understood the truth that Japanese admirals had refused to admit since Midway. Pearl Harbor had not been Japan's triumph. It had been its fatal mistake. Instead of shocking America into submission, it had steeled American resolve. Instead of buying decisive time, it had bought only a brief window Japan squandered with overextension and arrogance. Instead of crippling the U.S. Pacific Fleet, it had forced the United States to rebuild, and rebuild stronger. And at Guadalcanal, in the steaming jungles and tortured seas of the Solomon Islands, Japan was now paying for that mistake in blood.